of lies. You are listening to the JohnAge Project.
Trust no one. Trust no one. Trust no one.
You found it. You're here. You're headlong down the runaway train that is the AnomicAge, and I am your host, JohnAge. So happy to be back with you once again in the dark side of the AM. Please check out AnomicAge.com if you've not already done so. As usual, I'm coming at you from the coastal plain of the old North States. I'll be your tour guide this evening as we take a somewhat satirical journey down the path of murder, destruction, mayhem, and the extermination of human life on this planet. A forced march into obsolescence thrust upon us by a global satanic death cult of pedophiles. Check out AnomicAge.com once again. Like all the likes, subscribe to all the subscriptions. PayPal.me/AnomicAge, Patreon.com/AnomicAge as well. PayPal, Cash App, buy me a cup of coffee, all that and so much more at AnomicAge.com. If you listen to this on YouTube, I guarantee I got so many videos you've never seen. So check it out at the homepage. All right, enough of that tomfoolery, eh? Let's get into the realness in the dark side of the day. First and foremost, I want to say happy Friday the 13th. I realize we're now into, sadly, the June of 14th. But happy Friday the 13th. Always one of my favorite days. To be honest, this one was kind of more lackluster than I'd hoped. But watched a little Friday the 13th Part 3. Saw some Tremors with the fam. And even watched a little Clue 2, even though that wasn't my cup of tea. Anyway, thank you for sharing the wee hours of the AM with me and continuing our conversation. Title of tonight's episode, From Good to Low Vibrations. The Death of Brian Wilson. So I want to talk a little bit about Brian Wilson tonight. First, secondly, I want to throw out some condolences to his family. You know, not here to besmirch the great name of Brian Wilson in musical circles or anything like that. That's not really the premise of the show. So if you're looking for some dirt thrown, go somewhere else. It's really been a long time since I listened to anything, like substantial by the Beach Boys. And Brian's death a couple of days ago on June 11th. Well, I got to say, all death hits me so different than it used to. After my father's passing here in December, everything hits me a whole lot differently than it used to pertaining to death. So I won't say that I kind of skimmed over Brian Wilson's death because I didn't. But I guess I didn't soak it in and really realize the impact of the Beach Boys and so much and so on. So I kind of did that a little bit this afternoon, and I thought, man, I've really missed a little bit. I should have dove into this a little bit harder, and definitely should have put out a show about it. So here it is, the Death of Brian Wilson show, From Good to Low Vibrations. So I didn't really realize the impact of it. I was actually listening to some sort of millennial kind of hearing the Beach Boys for the first time and going like, oh my goodness, this is great. This is amazing. I thought it was just going to be cheesy oldies mess, and it's not. It's so much more than that. So, kind of just revisited a lot of that music. And I got to be grateful for so much, but I got to be grateful for my uncle because he introduced me to so much good music when I was a kid. So I'd say I went through a lot of different little short jaunt kind of phases as a kid, but definitely got into into the Beatles, the Monkees, the Beach Boys, a lot of that just, I would say, the purer side of the 60s. I got into that kind of early 60s. What else can you call it but pop? Pop music of the time is not pop music of today. But anyway, got into a lot of that. And I'd say I got into the earlier stuff. So I didn't really get into Pet Sounds and the White Album and stuff like that until a little bit later. And I think that's probably a good thing. I mean, it was amazing music, but the kind of bubblegum pop stuff was really, and saying this, don't misconstrue, because I know the Beatles were the British invasion and all that, but it really did kind of become Americana. And I definitely would say the Beach Boys, Americana, for sure. If you especially look at that early stuff, I would say until Brian Wilson kind of checked out in 64, very, very important music. And I didn't realize so much of the Beach Boys history until I kind of looked into that today. So very reminiscent of what you would see with the Jackson 5. I would say Murray Wilson, father of Brian Wilson and Carl Wilson and Dennis Wilson. So their father, definitely, I would say, very close parallels to what was going on with the Jackson 5. I mean, by all accounts, seemed to be kind of a jerk, a very totalitarian, kind of strict, and definitely abusive. I don't know if it got into the sexual abuse like the Jacksons or not, but definitely, I'd say mentally and physically abusive. That would be Murray Wilson. I think he kind of served as their early handler, just like Joe Jackson from the Jackson 5. So a lot of parallels there. And I really haven't done a deep dive in this. Again, I got to reach out to Sage of Quay. He's such a rich source of info on the Beatles, but I think I kind of hazard a guess he's got a little bit more info on some of these other bands and acts as well. So I got to make some time and do that. But so kind of the early phase of the Beach Boys. You got to definitely look into the Wrecking Crew. I know, again, Sage Aquay covers this quite a bit, but the Wrecking Crew was definitely responsible for some of that musicianship on their records. Arguably how much or how little, but definitely I would say the Beach Boys didn't really play any instruments, so to speak, at least not on a good professional level, except for Brian Wilson, of course. So you got to look into that as well and sort of say, how much of this is real and how much of this is illusion? Very much like the Beatles. So I don't know. I got to say I don't know on that one. But it can't be denied that Brian Wilson, by all accounts, a musical genius. So I don't know. Again, real or imaginary, I'm gonna bite on this one and say real. Seemed to be musical genius. You look at Pet Sounds, you look at the harmonies and the layers of their music. I did not really realize or appreciate that until today. I think I appreciated that in the sense that I bought into everybody else's hype. But listening to all that music today reminded me of why I loved all that music when I was a kid. And I'm talking like second, third grade, like that was the kind of stuff that I really got into as a really young kid, thanks to my uncle. So really just kind of went through a bunch of his records, got, dub tapes of them, kind of listened to a lot of those records in the back room at my grandparents' house. And it wasn't until today that it was just kind of awe-inspiring how amazing that music was. It was, I always say it's something if a sound or if music, a song or whatever, can give you chills and you don't really know why. There's a lot of stuff you listen to in adolescence and you think of that girl, you think of those friends, you think of that party, you think of whatever that is, that stirs up and conjures different images. But I would say the Beach Boys and the Beatles and a few other bands out there, you just listen to those songs and it gives you chills. Not really because it takes you back to a certain time, but just I think the sonic resonance of it is so impactful. So that was what really struck me today with the Beach Boys. And I do believe a lot of their early stuff especially just kind of gets written off as hokey in 2025, and it shouldn't, but it does. And the same thing with the early Beatles stuff. The I Want to Hold Your Hand era, I think that gets so written off as hokey and just cornball in 2025. But the reason it does is because we are so far from the light. That's the real problem, folks. We are so far removed from music that has that sonic resonance and impacts us on a spiritual chord. We're so far from that. That's why we look at that and say, oh, that's corny, that's hokey. That's the reason, folks. That's what's up. So, again, when I was looking into some of this today, it struck a lot of other chords, pun intended, just about how fouled up our current society is. So I'm not breaking any news here. Anybody that's got any inkling of this stuff knows Tavistock Institute, MI6, MI5, CIA, but primarily CIA was responsible, and this is just mainstream news here, responsible for the modern art movement. You know, the PP Christ and all this Jack Dripper just dripping nonsense on a campus. Oh, this is priceless. You just don't understand. You just don't get it. You know, that sort of nonsense. So all that really sprung from CIA and Tavistock. That's where this came from. And it was kind of like that fledgling, mid to late 60s push to get people to accept things that were trash, things that were just garbage. If you look at the statue, I can't remember if it's in I think it's New York. I don't know. The fat black lady that they've got out there is a statue. And, oh, this is just amazing. This is beautiful. It's along the same lines of the George Floyd statue and all this other baloney. So, tons of memes out there comparing, the horrible artistry of today with the amazing artistry of yesterday. Can't even hold a candle to it, folks. It's not even in the same ballpark. And just an anecdotal tale, but I'll throw this out there for my own 2 cents on this. I went to the bookstore, fill in the blank big box store. It's all the same garbage nowadays. But went to the bookstore with my daughter to pick up a book. It was for a birthday for a friend or something. But I've been in there many times before. Always get the same vibe. It's always a very discernment, on high alert. Just almost feel yucky. That's what I told her when we left. I just feel yucky going in the bookstore. Always feel yucky. Because it's so agenda heavy, it's not even funny. It's like all the people in there are just these Nellies, these holding the wife's purse and just these complete Nellied out, wussified guys. And at the same time, this sort of hipster chic chicks and the cool kids that are like, oh, I'm into rainbow flags and tolerance. That's the whole shtick vibe of the bookstore. But anyway, it wasn't lost on me that all the book covers, at least for the kids, it's all kind of the same, just garbage art. I'm not even saying that the art is bad, but it's not good. I'm just saying all the art on all the children's books is the same. It's the same, predictable, kind of cruddy, cartoonish, half Jap animation kind of just mess. And it's all clean, but just AI clean. It's not good. It's just... And I've said this many times, but I compare it to a lot of the early Golden Book artwork, which looks so realistic, so lifelike, soft lines, blended imagery, just beautiful faces and figures of the children, of the adults, of everything in those early Golden Books. I can't think of the author's name, but I'll try to look it up. Just beautiful art, and you juxtapose that to what you see now, just complete mess. That's all I'll say. It's just mess. But again, it kind of plays into that theme where we have been conditioned to accept, believe in, and buy total refuse. That's really what it boils down to. And you could go down the rabbit hole of how influential the Beach Boys were. I mean, for my genre, a ton of punk acts, most notably the Ramones, the Vindictives, Screeching Weasel, the Queers. There's a whole subgenre that just copies the Ramones sound. But with that, you got to give a huge wink and a nod to the Beach Boys sound, because the Ramones sound, blended harmonies, that kind of soft, bubblegumish lyrical sound and content, just beautiful. But at the same time, you got to know where that music came from. And again, I harken back to Brian Wilson. I'm 100% buying into he was the musical genius behind all that. Please call me false and prove it. I hope I'm not, but much like the Beatles and John Lennon and Paul McCartney, I'm sure it was probably an op. Hope not, but it seemed to be an op. So here's the deal. About 1964, they cut ties with Murray Wilson because he was being too strict. He was saying no girls and no drugs and no booze. And of course, that didn't follow suit nor fall in line with the 60s theme. So you got to kind of wonder, was he the bad guy or was he kind of keeping them together? I don't know. What we do know is, by his own admission, Brian Wilson, around that same time, became a complete agoraphobe, became basically bedridden because he was having a breakdown and didn't want to go out and tour anymore. So 64, he, by all practical purposes, kind of hung up the boots as far as being a touring act with the Beach Boys. Again, by his own admissions, interviews saying, he was sitting around snorting a bunch of coke, which, again, by a 64 standards, has got to be a big record scratch. And what? Because that wasn't even the popular drug of choice at that early, 1964 genre. It was mainly weed and moving into LSD at that point in the game. As, again, own admonition there, just chilling at the house doing a bunch of coke, obviously smoking weed, and began experimenting with the LSD. I don't know when he began, but definitely it took its toll by 64. Wasn't really touring with the band, wasn't going out, became just bedridden with fear of going out, had a breakdown. Like, all this is just, again, mainline history. This isn't breaking anything new here. But again, I would suggest, as the title of the show suggests, went from good vibrations to very low vibrations. And I would also heavily underscore the drug element of this. And I also have to wonder if he didn't have a handler. Seems like the handler was keeping him really, really doped up, shut away in the studio, making these classic records, writing these classic songs. And again, you got to get into Mike Love and several lawsuits as to who really wrote and did a lot of these songs. I don't know. I know that Brian Wilson's getting most of the street cred and most of the credibility as far as writing and royalties and the like. So I don't know. But for all practical purposes, he was kind of hanging up the boots at that point in the game. Then we got to see, is this another handler or not? The name Eugene Landy, Landy. Eugene Landy, controversial figure known for his work as a therapist and later business manager for Brian Wilson. So he was basically the guy, he was a psychologist, in my opinion, keeping him crazy. And became the business manager. He was kind of even getting royalties written over to him and credit and trying to get on albums and all kinds of stuff. This is Eugene Landy. And he was a controversial figure, to say the least, because he was his controversial therapy techniques. He was his therapist for a good clip, and then he wasn't, and then he was in again. So it seems to be very culty, seems to be definitely a handler I wouldn't even say of sorts. It seems to be obviously a handler of Brian Wilson. Finally kicks this guy by about, 1980s it looks like here. I had all this written down in the notes. I'm just kind of winging it here at the end. But, yeah, so Eugene Landy seems to be a handler. And this is something I wanted to talk about earlier, several shows back, and it kind of slipped my mind. But I want to touch on this too because people really don't get how much all of these celebrities are handled. Even if it's not the obvious handler, like I'm alluding to here, that really just controls and has all the reins of a lot of these celebrities. I would say even if they don't have a quote-unquote handler, their publicist is the handler. I can't even remember what I was listening to several weeks back, really, but it was discussing just that. I can't remember the act that I think it was Eric Clapton. It was Eric Clapton and a few of these people. Might have been people from Pink Floyd, but don't quote me on that one. But it was really just discussing how a lot of these big stars, big celebrities, obviously musicians, do have and know a lot of this information. Have known for a long time. Information a la New World Order, ghosts, goblins, demons, aliens, the whole spectrum of the quote-unquote conspiracy. You know what I mean? And a lot of these people, if you talk to them one-on-one, the person I remember, I don't know who they talked to, but they were talking to Eric Clapton, got through, talked to him one-on-one, and he was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll go on the record and spill the beans on X, Y, and Z. They were all set to go on show, whatever, cover a lot of this stuff, and then a publicist steps in and says, hey, we can't actually have him talk about this. And the same thing is true for several other big-name artists that you would all recognize. So whether it's an actual handler or if it's their publicist acting as the handler, however you want to frame it, that's really what's going on. So a lot of these people really do know a whole lot more than we probably give them credit for. But they're not allowed to step out of orthodoxy. They can't cut the reins from their handlers or from their publicists because they want to still get paid. Just like this Eugene, good night, nurse, Landy, L-A-N-D-Y, Eugene Landy. I guarantee he was in there trying to do the same thing with Brian Wilson. He was. This is known information. Trying to get cuts of deals, weaseling his way into managerial positions, getting writing credits, getting song credits, trying to get in on the records. I mean, this is what was going on. It's not that blatant with so many of these folks. But for so many of these celebrities, you have no idea the litany of people that becomes part of that industry. From publicists to drivers to security to chefs to workers at the house to workers on the bus to guitar techs to setup techs and everything in between, folks. So if the proverbial wheels stop on whoever your great artist happens to be, then everybody's losing a paycheck. So it's quite literally the publicist or AKA handler's job to make sure that everybody still gets paid. That's why you have these people drugged out of their minds on uppers and downers and everything in between. Sometimes it's recreational, sometimes it's pharmaceutical, but just about every time it's so the machine doesn't shut down. And sadly, that's just a recurring narrative for so many of these artists. You want to talk about Elvis, you want to talk about Michael Jackson, you want to talk about the Stones, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, and the like, man, it's all the same old song. And it's really disturbing. But it does play into this switch from a good to a low vibrational frequency. Because if you want to go back to CIA, Tavistock, and anybody else that I've already mentioned there from the 60s onward, it was a very conscious and intentional shift to a low vibrational frequency. Changing the music, changing the messages, changing the artists. I mean, everybody's seen the picture that's on your screen now from my album art for this episode. I believe it's from late 70s, if not early 80s, and it's showing a comparison between a parking lot of the late 70s to 2025. And that's just a microcosm. It's showing the very colorful nature that cars used to come in beautiful colors. You wouldn't believe the styles. If you're listening to this as a millennial or somebody in their teens or 20s, just please look up old cars, because they actually had sculptors sculpt the shape of these beautiful curves in cars from the 50s and 60s, and even the 70s took a little bit of a dive for sure, but nothing compares to the garbage on the roads now. They just stamp them out, cut them out, pathetic plastic cars of today. All very boring styles, all very boring colors, but at a premium price. Garbage. Same old thing. You could look at a ton of different memes that compare just a McDonald's of today, which looks like this stained brown and gray modern garbage, just atrocious look. Compare that to a McDonald's of the 80s. Beautiful colors, well manicured, amazing decorations at the holidays, all kinds of colorful cartoons and little hamburglar creatures everywhere. It's just all atrocious today. That's really what it boils down to. And there's a reason why the music and the movies and all entertainment is dying. It's because it stinks. The movies are just remakes. The television shows are just hardly even watchable. They're so agenda-driven. And the same with the music. I mean, the music is perhaps the most atrocious. Is there pop hits? Yeah. Does it take a heck of a lot of talent to create that mess? No. Because it's all just the same old song. Tons of documentaries on this that just go into the fact that basically like 3 people have written all the pop hits of the last 25 years. That's why they all sound the same. Same tempo, same beat, same chorus, same verse. It's all the same few people. That's why you hear the same songs regurgitated at Target, at Walmart, at Old Navy. I mean, all these songs are just intentionally pumped everywhere. And people get to the point where they start singing them, not because they're good, but because they're just so ever-present. That sort of insidious nature of music just kind of gets in your head. You end up singing these just dreadful songs about nothing. Nothing, folks. That's the sad truth of it all, man. Just nothing. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, so that kind of takes us through our trip from good to low vibrations. And I'm not going to jump off the deep end of the pool here because a lot of people just can't handle it. But we are vibrating at a low frequency in our society right now, folks. And it's intentional. It's sad, but very intentional. They don't want us to come together. They don't want us singing happy, positive songs and music. They don't want these beautiful layered sounds, harmonies, vocals, just amazing artistry. They don't want that in the music anymore. And it's not by accident. Because when you're a parasitic creature, you're moving at a low vibrational frequency. When the impetus of your life is to get off on how horrible things are and start telling, poor stories and, well, I'm doing even worse than you. Like, oh, my car broke down and I got hit by a truck. That's the vibration of our society today. The yellow badge of victimhood. Everyone's trying to out-victim the other. And if you're not trying to out-victim somebody, you're trying to get social cred or street cred or virtue signal. See, I gave that guy $1. He's a bum. I gave him $1. That's where we're at, folks. We are at such a low vibrational frequency. The whole point of most lives, it seems now, is to get validation. I'm getting validation. People approve of what I say. People liked me. That old Saturday Night Live bit. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And doggone it, people like me. That's the whole point of today, folks. Getting liked, getting attaboys, getting pats on the back, pats on the head. Good slave. You said the right talking point. See all those people, all those other mindless giblets, they agree with you. And it's real funny. My daughter and I were having this conversation a couple hours ago, really, but that so much of our society now really is predicated on getting respect from others, getting that validation, getting that attaboy. And what I try to explain to her is, sometimes it doesn't matter. You don't really want respect from people that you don't respect. See how that works? Because I fall in the same trap sometimes, and I feel like, man, I'm not getting the respect that I deserve from person X or this group or that group. And then I have to sit back and take some stock and say, wait a minute, do I actually respect those people? No. Do I like those people? Do I want to be like those people? So if the answer is no, then you're probably just wasting time. And I think we all have to do that, folks. We all have to flip the script and go from that low vibrational back to the high vibrational. We got to cut the fat in our lives. Stop hanging out with people that are bringing us down. Quit hanging out with those soul-sucking parasites. Get out of those soul-sucking jobs. Get away from the things that are stealing your joy. Because it's easy to get into that trap. It's real easy. Stop watching all the dark stuff. I'm a huge horror movie fan, and I will watch some horror movies on Friday the 13th because I like them. That being said, I don't get into this fear porn and all this like grotesque mutilation and this hyper-realistic death of today. That doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't. And I think people that get off on that and are really into that, it's because they do not have the capacity nor the life experience and understanding as to how real those things can be. That was my shtick as a young kid. I was like, oh, this is so cool. I like watching Faces of Death and all this gross stuff. And then as I got older, I had the depth. And I went, hey, to quote Embrace, death is not glamorous. It's not as it is portrayed in the movies and TV. It's not. It's far more disturbing. And once we start getting a little life experience and start moving beyond the shock value and the cool, I'm cool because I like this gross stuff, and I'm cool because I like all this hard stuff. It's a joke, folks. It's a joke. So we got to stop living our lives for other people. If you're living your life to prove something to someone else, rethink that. If you're living your life to get social credit scores and validation and all that virtue signaling mess, you might want to rethink it, folks. Just thinking out loud here. All right, I've gone over time. It's all right. I like having these conversations. I like having them in the dark side of the AM. But I'll just leave it right there for this evening. Sad to see the death of Brian Wilson. Definitely a musical savant. And I don't think we're going to see anything like that for quite a while. You can't. In today's society, you just can't. Same thing with Michael Jackson. Same thing with a lot of these other big-name songwriters, entertainers, if you will, whatever you want to call them. The society that we live in today just does not produce that level of talent. And it's sad. You can't do everything, but you can do something. Get out there, do your part, make a difference. And I'll be seeing you sooner than later in the Anomic Age.
Thank you for listening to the Anomic Age, a JohnAge project.
For past shows, further info, and to comment, go to AnomicAge.com. That's AnomicAge.com. Till next time, thank you for listening to the Anomic Age.